Hey friends, welcome to the channel. So here's another interesting story of DEKU. What if DEKU had Biohazard Quirk? Though I did give the original author credit at the beginning of the video, I respectfully ask that before granting copyright strike, the original creator reclaims their rights or removes this video. Kindly get in touch with us through the details listed in the channel information. We honor and recognize the rights of authors, and I will remove that particular video on my own. I'm grateful. Biohazardous by Danmakajinkiaku. As Izuku Midoriya woke up, the first light of morning crept through a thick, tinted glass and hit his face. He yawned, wiping the drowsiness from his eyes. Having slept on his stomach, he used his arms to push himself off the bed and started to stretch. There were his arms first. Afterwards, his neck, shoulders, back, and angular dorsal plates, which extend from his nape to the end of his 1.5-meter-long tail. He started scratching himself, along his scales and along his skin, and where the scales met the skin and the flesh met the scales. He looked at his own smartphone at home idly. It was a Wednesday, and he had to report to school. If his friend Kachan were to skip school for at least 4 days a week, he didn't want him to follow through on his pledge. He got out of bed, fixed himself a bowl of cereal, and switched on the TV. Using his tail as leverage and a third appendage, he ate with one hand while taking notes and watched the most recent hero news. He then had a shower, cleaned his teeth and changed into his pants. But first he had to get over the thick, lead barrier separating his apartment's living room from its reception area, before he could put on his middle school uniform. A portion of the barrier parted after he entered a unique code, exposing the rear of one of his very large and baggy hazardous materials costumes. Wearing them was a bother, but if he was going to venture out into the world and engage with people, it was a must. His incredibly constrictive mask, which prevented him from eating and made it difficult for him to breathe, arrived first. A unique tail harness and dorsal fin guards. He then carefully put on his protective gloves, taking care with his talons to avoid creating even the slightest tear. The boots followed, each of them hitting the ground with a loud thud. At last, he donned his hideous bodysuit in yellow and gray. With everything prepared, he shut off the portion of his barrier that was open, entered a new code, and entered the reception room where his luggage, his flip phone and school uniform were waiting for him at home. After putting them on and retrieving his house keys, he fully closed the barrier, triple locked to ensure that nothing was left exposed, and carefully opened the door. He was unable to smell the aromas of life, therefore he inhaled and exhaled filtered air. There was no smell of cooked food, flowers, or automobile exhaust. If his neighbors had still been residing in the flats next to his, he would not have been able to smell what they would have prepared. He was unable to detect the scent of either Kachan's signature fragrance or that of his buddy Katsuki, who he knew was employed by the same company as his parents. Still, he could hear his rough grunts. He could see him waiting as well. Beyond his door, utterly indifferent to anything save ensuring his companion attends school. Hey, shut in. Sup. Close that door and let's get to school, Izuku. He let himself into his classroom. He could hear it as he got closer to the door. The sounds of a busy classroom filled with children chatting and laughing about life, school, and whatever else they desired. Chatting and mingling with friends, even if they are limited to their own inner circles and cliques. But the instant he and his hazmat entered, everyone stopped chatting. The silence was so complete that you could hear a feather hitting the ground. Moving away from Katsuki Bakugo's workstation and towards the back of the room, he positioned his desk on the same side as the door rather than next to the windows. Setting down his bag, he took a seat and ignored the black marker scribbled all over his desk with threats, insults, and remarks. All of it was irrelevant to him. He was more concerned with other matters. But Kachan, he refused to let it pass. Upon noticing the graffiti on Izuku's desk, he stormed out of his workstation, crossed the room, and confronted his pal. With his teeth bared, he snarled like a feral animal. His hands erupted in rage. Nobody said, "Who are the assholes that did this?" Nobody put up their hand. Izuku's frustrated sigh and Katsuki's labored breathing were the only sounds audible. He exploded on another student's desk to punctuate his statement, None of you. What, was it the fairy fucking godmother? Come on, you fuckers. You got the balls to do this shit to Izuku's desk right here, but none of y'all have the balls to face me for it. Get out of the crowd, or I'll find you myself. Believe me, you won't like the fact that I had to waste my precious time and effort to track down which scumbag did this. The classroom was so silent that it could have broken iron. Even though Katsuki aspired to be a hero, everyone in the class knew that he was a volatile and dangerous person. He resembled a stick of dynamite. Light it, and get ready to blow yourself up. It was also well known that he was a fierce friend of Izuku, the eccentric in the class. Because of his general indifference, the middle schooler was an obvious target for bullying, but just because he was the mouse on the lion's back did not make him a safe one. However, it seemed unfair that since a few bastards chose to write on Izuku's desk, the entire class had to be the ones trembling in dread. Hey, anybody see who did it? I didn't. I got here just a couple minutes before those two. I walked in right before those two. Hey, I came in here 30 minutes ago. That mess looks like, I don't know, an hour's worth of insults and a couple black markers. That's not my handwriting. Those were there when I got here. Well, they aren't my words, and I was the first one here this morning. So, was it someone who stayed after last night? You don't think any of us would have broken in, right? A hand struck one of the tables, indicating, hey, someone did that over there. There's probably. The kid said, fine, I did it. With a mean-spirited expression on her face and a wicked multicolored hairstyle on her head. She was tall for a middle schooler. With a terrified sneer on his lips, he stormed up to face Katsuki, his bat-like wings flapping out from behind him. It was me, bitch. I was the guy who wrote all over DEKU's desk. Number. Wah. Someone roughly snatched his collar. What are you on about? That's not all. Your dirty hands weren't the only ones that worked on this. Tell me who else did it, and I'll leave you with only a few marks. If you don't say anything, you'll have to deal with burns all over your body. How come you always have to be DEKU's attack dog? Hell, half the class doesn't even think that freak is human. Never takes off that hazmat suit. What hideous mug does that? Why should you care, anyway? The explosioneer asked. He has to hide under all that sh*t, anyway? Flung him against the closest wall before picking him up once again to give him another smack. You know the fucking reason. Even more reason to call DEKU a freak. Seriously, how can DEKU be a hero with a quirk like his? It's useless to heroes, like a paper doll in the rain. It'd be better if he was quirkless, that way we wouldn't be in any trouble at all. I, for one, am glad DEKU ain't trying for any sort of hero course. It's better for all of us if that useless trash stays away from all society. He was hit with a fist. Shut up, shut up, shut up. You have no right to call him by that childhood nickname. Damn it, I'm gonna. Everyone's heads shot around to see the boy in the hazmat, still seated at his desk with his first period textbook open and in front of Hai, saying, do nothing, Kachan. Class is about to start, and that means our teacher's going to come in soon. You're aiming to get into UA's prestigious hero course, right? You haven't gotten into much trouble here at Aldera, but assaulting another student is going to affect the likelihood of your acceptance into UA. If that happens, Auntie Mitsuki's going to be very worried about you. She and Uncle already have a lot of problems to worry about, so just ignore him, Kachan. It's better that way. Who, he said, turning to face the object of his wrath, who appeared to be about to smile. He released his grip and calmly made his way back to his seat, saying, if you smile, I kick your balls. As he went past, he cast a troubled glance at Izuku. Izuku used to be an extremely helpful boy, constantly opening doors for newcomers, constantly attempting to assist an elderly woman crossing the street. Those kinds of actions. He merely wanted to serve people and was kind and nice. He may or may not have had this mindset because he loved heroes, people who used their skills and quirks to serve others. Of course, there were individuals who saw becoming a hero as a means of achieving fame and money, but Izuku generally made an effort to ignore them. Instead, he read news stories and watched movies with his mother, Inko Midoriya, and concentrated more on those who genuinely wanted to help. though Hisashi Midoriya was frequently abroad, working hard for Inko and Izuku to provide them money, he would have watched them with his father. He was thus mainly left with his mother. Izuku Midoriya was very close to his mother. Despite all the nightlights and bedtime stories he was given, he was unable to sleep in his own bed and was forced to sleep next to his mother. In addition, he insisted that his mother bathe and dress him rather than taking a shower on his own. His mother was a young hero fanatic who spent so much time with him that she frequently knew more facts about heroics than anybody else in their apartment complex, and occasionally in the Bakugo apartment complex as well. Katsuki's encounters with Midoriya now differed from those of the other people with the broccoli boy. In contrast to numerous other small children who encountered the cinnamon bun with curly hair, Kacchan didn't find Izuku's constant babbling annoying. Actually, despite his lack of speech, he was just as talkative as the green bean thanks to his loud voice and disposition. They were inseparable and would stop at nothing to support one another, and they soon became close friends, frequently playing heroes in the streets and parks of Mustafu, Japan, with other children. Take Izuku's quirk's side effects, for instance. It turned out that Izuku's quirk was a bit of a mutation. When children are born with the ability to have quirks, their quirk is typically one of three things: their father's quirk, their mother's quirk, or some combination of the two that creates a new quirk. However, mutations and other oddities can happen in genes, like the glowing baby that had the world's first quirk. His quirk appeared less than a week after Katsuki's quirk initially appeared. It turned out that Izuku had a simple mutation quirk that made him resemble a Komodo dragon, with strong jaws, tough claws, hard scales, and good terrestrial and aquatic ability. Izuku was very surprised when he woke up one morning at the age of 4 to find that his lower arms, lower legs, upper back, and tailbone area covered in dark green scales, talons instead of nails, and a tail. The gene that Hisashi's father had passed on to his son failed to show, or, since it is a quirk, activate, in Hisashi, and then showed up in Izuku. The peculiarity was that teenage Izuku speculated that his quirk would have been a fire-breathing reptilian guy who could absorb heat to power himself up, had it not been for the mutation, which basically replaced anything having to do with heat or fire with radiation. He sort of inherited his father's ability to breathe fire, as well as his mother's ability to attract small objects, which combined with his Komodo-esque genes to make him that way. Along with his reptilian traits, he was able to breathe radiation and absorb it. Little Midoriya was very proud of his quirk, especially the absorption part. Imagine all the accidents he could help clean up. He could even do it from the water because of the Komodo in him. He and his family were happy with the power he had, and he showed it off to Kacchan and his family. The two had even started small sparring matches, using their quirks to attack and defend and stopping before things got too out of hand. He refused to spar using his radioactive breath, though, because he didn't want any complications from hitting Kacchan with a radiation beam. At 5.5 years old, Inko Midoriya received a cancer diagnosis 16 months after his quirk appeared. At 6.5 years old, Inko Midoriya passed away 28 months after his quirk appeared. Izuku thought that he was the one who killed his mother because his quirk involved radiation, therefore it wouldn't be out of the question for him to be a walking carcinogen. Strangely enough, it was a single incidence. Examinations and scans confirmed that Izuku's. As for the Bakugo family, their classmates, and their teachers, most of them remained cancer-free, though a handful were classified as at risk for the deadly illness. Imagine telling that to a little child who has lost his best friend. One of the Dawn-era heroes he knew of was a person who got stronger as he got angrier and gave off huge amounts of radiation himself. He hid himself in a cave for decades before people found his remains and gave him a proper burial. Izuku thought about giving up everything. His dreams of becoming a hero and saving others, his home, his father, Kacchan, and running away, hiding somewhere in the wilderness or something. He might try to stow away on a ship bound for a place like Antarctica, or just swim there himself. He only gave up on the idea of withdrawing from society and his family because of his father and Kacchan, but only under certain restrictions. He wanted to be left alone in an area designed to prevent radiation leaks as much as possible, If he had to attend school, which was agreed to be at least 3 days a week without breaks, he would receive hazmat suits. They even managed to get some equipment installed in the Midoriya flat, such as a separate reservoir to prevent his potentially rotty. Thus, Izuku voluntarily imprisoned himself in his anti-radiation bunker, his self-made prison cell, where he allowed his feelings and ideas to fester like an inflicted wound that refuses to go away. Days passed in bitterness towards himself, years passed in growing antisociality. His father is overseas, so what could he do? His constant quiet is making his peers ignore him or become hostile, and the only person who can keep him sane is Katsuki. But all that is holding him to a precipice is friendship and his father's best intentions. He wants to completely give up heroes because he hates himself, believes he will never be able to follow the same path he set out to take years ago, and is slowly but surely moving towards a dark path that could turn him from a hero into something else. Destroying. Izuku left the school and found a manhole right away. Knowing that everyone was watching him, he went straight for it and took off the covering. This is how he gets home. He wades through the sewer system. Well, he doesn't wade through the ick, but the waves of sludge are high enough that they sometimes spill over onto the walkways lining the sides of the sewer pipes. It's fine for Izuku, though it ain't radiation, but he's developed a tolerance for the waste. It was something he had to get used to if he wanted to avoid people on his way home. He would do it on his way to school too, but Kachan would have none of it. He knew Izuku would. He walked with his tail swishing behind him, brushing away cobwebs and raising a cloud of dust, but something felt wrong. Despite the rats and insects, he sensed that there was something else down here with him, something somewhat bigger than him. As he turned the corner, Izuku finally saw what he had been feeling. A lump of metal loosely shaped like a dog, with the typical 4 legs and long muzzle of a dog, but with no paw pads or pads at the ends of the legs. Claws, and in place of a mouth or nose, the robo-dog's muzzle held a single, large torch. Beneath the light, which glowed sakura pink, a tube extended into the sewer water, siphoning off some of it. After a few seconds, Izuku watched as the metal straw retracts back into the robo-dog's muzzle, and it slowly sauntered off on its little wheels. Intrigued, Izuku decided to follow it, figuring he would be alright since he knew these tunnels well enough to identify the ones that would return him to the manhole outside his apartment building. Heading for one of the sewer system's exit grates, which were designed to let large machinery enter the sewer system in case the city needed it. They were rarely opened, but they did see use and upkeep. The dog was headed towards one. It was probably too big to fit into the manholes on the surface, so someone let it in there. They strolled through the muck before he eventually saw some natural light. Izuku wanted to know what was going on here, of course, but he didn't want to involve himself with another person, especially since he had just waded through the sewers. After a few moments of contemplation, he turned tail and headed home, which he was fine with doing because he had homework to complete. His curiosity was halted when he saw the obvious shadow of a person outside the gates, probably the machine's owner or something. His life will never be the same after he interacts with the machine. A.N. A new fiction from the plot bunny that just won't shut up. I was writing Fighting Spirit Chapter 16 when this occurred to me, and I was unable to concentrate until I got rid of the thought. Updates on this one will come in extremely irregular intervals, so please be patient with everything. I can't help but think of the robo-dog here as the scrappers from Horizon Zero Dawn with the Watcher's head in place of the scrapper's mouth. Feel free to use your own mental image if you have one. In case you're not familiar with it, Izuku can be thought of as a miniature version of Godzilla, similar to Godzilla Jr. or even Manila. As of right now, I don't have any intentions to incorporate additional characters that have kaiju-related elements, but if I can, I'll attempt to include. Perhaps I should even create a third hero class, but I'll put that notion on hold for now. They might be supporting characters. Either way, see you all later. Goodbye. Section 2. When will they give me a wave back? The new suit, unlike his apartment, had a special breathing apparatus with a one-way filter designed to limit what he could exhale, but never what he could inhale. The glass visor was often blurry, he could barely hear through all the layers, but now he could actually smell things. both a blessing and a curse. He would never get tired of occasionally sniffing a flower or stopping in front of a local perfume shop, something he couldn't do before. But he still had to deal with the stink of perspire. Even worse was the smell of food, real food, not some rations he could stuff into his suit, which made lunchtimes at Aldera a source of constant salivation and whining, like a fox spotting a delicious grapevine that was just a hair too high for him to reach, no matter how many acrobatics he performed to get at it. He cursed his quirk for making fun of him in this way every time he was at school, another grievance to add to his already extensive list of grievances. It was a minor one, yes, but one that had to be addressed. Now, though, he was almost grateful for it. His sense of smell distinguished the dog's different metals and oxides from the musty, stale air of the Musutafu subterranean, alerting him to the existence of anything he could name a friend. Izuku didn't require an explanation, nor did he really care about if the dog was there every day or only occasionally, as he was. The fact that the scrapper was always present when Izuku was there was all that mattered. Izuku was extremely cautious of the robot after their initial encounter. What was it for? Why was it in the pipes with him? Is the device connected to any villain or group that uses technology? Would any self-defense mechanisms kick in if someone approached too closely? Could it? Izuku was kept at bay, if only for a week or two, by questions such as, somehow affect the lead in a hazmat suit and render its anti-radioactive properties null? He even entertained the notion of discovering an alternate, putrid route to his home. Izuku finally drew near to the device. Whatever it was, whatever devices it carried, it seemed unaffected by a teenage boy in a hazmat suit lumbering towards it, and, upon being cautiously prodded with the tip of his tail, it reacted positively to contact, simply turning and glimmering its pink flashlight eye for a moment, as though it were a living creature, before returning to its job of sucking sludge from the sewers. At this point, Izuku thought he would amuse himself a little by merely crouching down and observing the thing and what it was doing. This was nothing new to the teenager, of course. Being the shut-in that he was, staring out his window at the outside world was a common, albeit lonely, activity for him. Izuku seemed to find something inside himself just by spending time with the metal object, and one day he began talking to it. Their first exchange, like the ones that would come after, was one-sided and consisted mainly of Izuku asking the dog questions and then responding to those questions with his own ideas and opinions. But over time, the questionnaires developed into full-fledged short stories and tidbits of the radioactive Komodo's daily life. What they discussed on their way to school that day, what they did during lunch, and everything else they had discussed. All of this information was relayed to the small robot while it performed its duties in the sewers. The youngster was too shy to converse with a stranger he had never met, so naturally the conversation came to an end when Izuku and King Shisha approached the gated doorway that its creator or user was waiting behind. Nevertheless, the boy's discovery of his new friend appeared to have lifted his spirits somewhat, as evidenced by the way he carried himself, walked, and talked, all of which were a little more chin up and head held high. His best friend Kachan started to notice this. "Hey, reclusive," he commented to Izuku one morning during their routine commune. "I can't see under that suit, but I can tell you've been having this dopey grin on your face for a bit." Really?" He brought a hand up to touch his face, forgetting he still had his hazmat suit on. "Oh. Ouch. I apologize for slightly dampening the atmosphere, nerd. Simply put, I felt compelled to draw attention to your happiness. You're generally simply uninterested in things." "Well, I wasn't too. Oh my god, I'm a horrible buddy." "No, Izuku. Give up doing that. I don't want you to go back to your depressed state. You were just happy. And by bad friend, what do you mean? Dude, you're such a great friend." "Ah, Kachan, I appreciate that, but I swear, I truly am. You know, I was meant to inform you about this major occasion, but I kept forgetting until you mentioned it today, when you mentioned how happy I looked. Which, in any case, I still find strange. Why can you tell without looking at my face? Is my tone, my speech, or my words? Is it my gestures, my behavior, my—" The other boy gently prodded the Komodo in the shoulder. a gesture they employ when Bakugo feels he wants to say something before Izuku starts talking endlessly. What this event is more important than that. What was it you were meant to tell me? That's correct. The problem is that, well, I made a friend, an additional friend. With an expression that was impossible to read, Bakugo simply stared. In the end, Bakugo had been Izuku's only friend since he was a young boy. He was the one who witnessed all of Izuku's highs and lows. He was the person Izuku confided in and cried on. A rare but necessary event. And he was the one to whom Izuku revealed his secrets. Although Izuku had an online presence, his paranoia prevented him from making any friends on any of the message boards and social media sites he frequented. This, in a way, made his friends somewhat dependent on him, which Bakugo lamented. How could Izuku develop as a person, even as a solitary? He smiled, tears streaming down his face as the information began to register in his head. Goddammit, get inside. He brushed away a few tears and said, shit, this makes me feel like Auntie Inko. You made me cry with happiness. She was always the sensitive kind. I'm sure she'd be crying with happiness, too. He then gave Izuku a gentle noogie after forcing him into an embrace. Kachan, exercise caution. You're going to tamper with the neck and chin seams. He turned to Izuku, who was fiddling with the hazmat suit's headpiece, and said, never mind that. I want to meet your other friend. The blonde simply waved her hand and said, I usually meet after school, while you're in club, and I walk the sewers. The club was cancelled. It seemed that the president was a jerk who was making crude remarks about a few of the club's female members. Interestingly, I have too. So, there's no way I'm not going to help you with expanding your friend group this afternoon. He put a hand on his friend's shoulder. Attend a parent-teacher conference with the shitstain later today. If the smell of shit and piss makes him uncomfortable, that'll be a small win for me. Well, what are you so guarded about? Come on. You know, they say Mon is best friend, but I don't think the people who coined that meant this. He didn't know what to expect when he went down to the sewers today. Maybe a friendly hobo, or maybe someone with a quirk similar to Izuku's, but more like a mutant alligator or turtle than an irradiated lizard. He was not prepared for junkyard junk dog. Bakugo figured that having a real friend and a virtual confidant was still better than nothing, comparing it to the American film they saw as kids about the volleyball and the castaway. What? Kachan, hurry up. Don't tell me you think something's wrong with King Shisha. Bakugo gave up all resistance at the mere sound of his friend's voice. No, not at all. I don't believe he has any issues. Izuku, I'm just going to be honest with you. I kind of assumed you were talking about something organic when you said, friend. I think this item contains some steel, and steel is an alloy composed of iron and carbon is... Bakugo delivered him a light-hearted shoulder punch. As smart ass, don't be a smart ass. Besides, when I say, organic, you understand. Though he knew it wouldn't help, he stroked Shisha's head, saying, but, well, this is fine. It's kind of like when a smaller child calls a toy or something their best friend. To be honest, I'm glad that you're being honest about something, even if it's not genuine. I don't have to be concerned that you might become a serial killer because of your loneliness. Did you really need to make such a dire statement? Obviously. I have to voice my ideas and be heard. Interaction between two individuals is crucial. To chat with Junkyard Dog. How do you approach him here? Izuku took his position next to Shisha. A little nearer to the garbage than Kachan was, but not as close as his new confidant was. He squatted down next to the contraption. A decent distance between him, the sludge of the sewers, and the dog. Really nothing noteworthy. I simply converse with him, following him around anytime he chooses to leave his current task and circle the pipes while we chat. Naturally, he doesn't speak, but I prefer to act as though he does. I occasionally perform his voice myself. That's right. What exactly does Junkyard Dog do in this situation? He appears to be using a syringe or similar object that has been dipped in sewer water, and I can see it ascending the object. Just curious as to what happens to the feces that gets sucked up. I'm not really sure. I assumed this man belonged to a business or group that was collecting data from the gunk in the river, but I checked everywhere and didn't find a logo of any kind. His thoughts were interrupted by an idea. Actually, come to think of it, there's this figure that keeps on waiting for the King Shisha around the old gates. I'm thinking some independent group is trying to clean the sewers or at least analyze what's in them, but I just don't know. Those corroded objects. Oh. Have you spoken with this individual? No, hold on, don't respond to that query. I am aware of the response already. Izuku shrugged, looking small, and Explodinator groaned. So, how long have you not interacted with the person behind the gates? Are you even aware of their appearance? All I can tell is that they have a distinctive head shape due to their shadow. Could it be hair? Could it be a quirk? Could be. You're going to try to get us to talk, won't you? Oh my stars, Kachan, please don't, Bakugo said, turning aside before the other boys broke eye contact. I'm not interested in. 2. At some point, you will have to. Which would you prefer, now or later? Never. Izuku took it with wary eyes, and when he was hoisted up, Kachan put a gentler hand on his shoulder while maintaining a firm grip on his friend's hand. He couldn't really get away. Not a damn option, sadly. He sighed and ran his hand through his hair. Bakugo stood up and stretched his legs before offering his friend a hand up. At this moment, Izuku, I know. I've known you for years, so I understand how difficult this is for you. You're terrified that someone else could find your quirk offensive. He attempted to push his way out, but the hold on his shoulder tightened. That's an understatement, Kachan. Please let me go, Kachan. I will as soon as you allow me to conclude my statement. Will you allow me to conclude our conversation over becoming friends? Izuku contemplated his words for a moment, and weighed the pros and cons before ultimately nodding yes. Okay. Good, good. You can meet with that other individual now or later. You are not required to do this right now. The simple fact is that you will ultimately need to speak with that individual. Either out of personal curiosity or because the person in charge of the gate wants to make the first move and wonders why their cherished metal dog is being followed around by a junior high school student wearing a hazmat suit. Shift. Hey, I told you earlier this morning when we were driving to school about what Shia and I do. I usually stop talking when we get close to the gates. You have no idea how well they can hear. He touched the ground lightly to demonstrate his point, saying, also, I'm pretty sure your footsteps echoed. So that means that other person is probably aware of something, or someone in this case, tailing their creation and the shit that junkyard dog sucks up. This implies that the other individual is probably aware of you. You will need to at least get ready for a future conversation if you decide against confronting this person right now. The Komodo sulked and bowed his head, his expression dejected and sullen. Kachan was correct. He was just postponing what was sure to happen. Social communication is undoubtedly his worst suit. And what a frightening place it is as well. It wasn't difficult for him, though, after all, he had King Shisha and Kachan as friends. And he is aware of that. They will accompany him on this. They'll support him. Assistance, Kachan, please help me practice this whole thing. I'd feel more prepared and confident if, well. He raised an eyebrow at his pal and noticed a little, subtle smile. With that, Shisha stopped gathering information from the river and started to leave, saying, of course, you lazy shut-in. Let's follow the mud while we begin your social training. So, Izuku? The three of them, Explosioneer, Komodo, and Dog, strode gingerly past puddles of filth and grime as they strolled down the sewerway. A few days had passed since Izuku had asked Katsuki to assist him in establishing conversation with a stranger he had never met. Though there was one occasion when Katsuki stood outside Izuku's door and spoke with him there, the majority of their sessions took place on their drive to and from school. Izuku has also studied fundamental human interaction a little bit, although it never hurts to be too. All well, then, be ready. Are you thinking of doing it today, or are we going to continue our talks? He gulped and shook a few beads of perspiration off his head, but despite what he said, he felt like he had this thing down and was ready to talk. Of course, I'm a bit nervous about this meeting. I'm hoping I can get another friend out of this, but if things go south for me I'd feel terrible about everything. I don't think I'd be able to even use this path to go back home. That's how poor I'd feel. He sighed. But, I suppose I can behave normally if things does not work out. Unfortunately, the two things that are most constant in my life are negativity and indifference. Katsuki positioned himself in front of Izuku and started to back away, saying, "Oi, please stop. We really don't need to go there. Hell, I refuse to go there. We are headed for a different conversation, one that's going to be good and positive, and you're going to get a new friend, damn it." So that he could speak with her directly. "Don't worry about a damn thing, Izuku. I got your back on this. Remember that, and remember, this is gonna be good." "Thank you, Kachan. Don't mention it. Like I said, I got your back. I'll also get my phone out to record you when you finally make a new friend that can actually communicate with you. No offense to Junkyard Dog here." "What? No. No, stop, don't do that. You're going to embarrass me, Kachan." Bakugo thought to himself, too late, I can already see the shadows of the gate and this mystery person. He quickly slowed down, falling behind his comrade. He placed both hands on the rear of Izuku's hazmat suit when King Shisha approached the sewer gates. The person's shadow. Izuku's pulse accelerated as the robot was struck by the fall. "Wyatt, Kachan, we still need to talk about the whole recording thing." He shoved him ahead, making him stagger forward and get close to the border between darkness and light. "Enough waiting. No time like the present, sink or swim, yada yada. Go. Make a friend." He peered out of the corner of his eye as he straightened up. At last, he was able to make out the unknown individual who had entered his thoughts as well as their dog. This lady was a shorter female than he was, and she had shoulder-length pink dreadlocks. She wore brown boots, navy fingerless gloves, a dark tank top and gray dungarees that were partially wrapped around her waist. Her enormous, steampunk-style goggles were something special. They resembled something from a video game. She had a black streak down her cheek and was filthy, smeared with grime and oil. Her eyes were the most remarkable feature. They were golden and had crosshair-shaped pupils. Right now, the target in the crosshairs was him. Kachan was recording off to the side, and for a few while, neither of them said anything, simply staring at each other. Izuku swallowed as he took the lead, feeling embarrassed about the whole quiet thing. "Hi," she said with a broad smile as soon as she entered the gates and grabbed Izuku's hand to shake it strongly. "I took my baby down to the sewers here, not expecting anyone to be down here, but then you turned out to be here. And I was so excited to talk to someone about my baby that they were following, but then you just slithered off. And that made me a bit sad, like I scared away a kid. But then you kept on coming back, but then you kept on leaving. And I just kept wondering if you were ever going to talk with me or even face me or something. Hatsume. Mei Hatsume. The name's Hatsume, and boy, do I love that kind of thing. Baby number 14 is a bit of a new invention of mine that's part of a collaboration with a classmate for our science fair project. I was a little sad, but then I heard you talking to my baby, so I thought I might have a chance. What's up with the fancy suit? Is this some kind of support gear to help regulate a quirk? You could be doing a little better than just being covered in a boring pile of lead, cloth, and rubber, but I can kind of see something like a middle ground. Hey. Can you and your blonde friend in the shadows tell me where you guys come from every time you guys go to the sewer? School uniform? Are you students somewhere? Bakugo lowered the phone camera gently as Izuku felt the relentless trembling cause his arm to grow numb. The two lads thought the person they would be meeting was either a regular Joe or a smart introvert who was skilled with machines in the days before this confrontation. Throughout all of their speculating and role-playing, they never once considered a eccentric extroverted engineer-style persona. I guess it's not all that horrible to be accepted as a friend by an extrovert. It's kind of a bummer that Izuku and I had to be so emotional over this, though. Really, a lot of time wasted. Hey, ka-a-a-cha-a-a-n, my y-y-y-y-a-a-a arm. Help. Section 3. What an untamed and enigmatic being. As soon as Izuku managed to remove his arm from the menacing woman with pink hair, he hurried to hide behind Kachan. "Oh, come on," he said, cocking his head to face his oldest friend. He removed Midoriya's frightened hands from his shoulder by shaking them. "Hands off, shut in. And what's with the trembling? You can clearly tell she isn't like the asshats in our class. Aren't y'all excited or happy or something? Come on, let me see your tail wag." Izuku instantly returned to his shoulder. The pink-haired girl was just staring at them with her head quizzically tilted to the side when he pointed out, "Kachan, it's just too much for me at the moment. I'm being overloaded by her in-your-face friendliness, which I need to remind you is not something I've faced before. Your parents, and dad aren't excitable like this. At least the stares of our classmates were something we were used to and could handle. How can I handle her, at this?" Bakugo sighed and pivoted so that Midoriya was facing the eccentric engineer and he was behind Midoriya, saying, "And besides, Komodo tails don't wag." He took his friend's shoulders firmly in his hands and pressed his face up to where Midoriya's ear was hidden by the headpiece of his suit. "Look, just do as we practiced. You already said hi, now you just need to offer your name, okay? Offer your name, then ask her hers," he added. He reminisced about the ways he and Izuku had rehearsed self-introductions. Using pillow dummies, strolling and conversing together while traveling to and from school. They even occasionally made Bakugo's parents pretend to be amiable strangers. Bakugo ran a hand through his hair in his head. Simulators, of course, are no match for the real thing. A portion of that was because Izuku was rehearsing with familiar material rather than approaching a complete stranger and asking for assistance in rehearsing his introduction. The girl with the long hair was also a contributing factor to her hyperactivity. He gave Komodo a shoulder pat. Izuku trembled and nodded. "Remember, I'm here for you." "So, yeah, hi. My name is, my name's Mizuku. I mean, Midoriya. Midoriya Izuku. Hi to meet you." He began to choke. He took a deep breath and exhaled. Yeah. Your name. What is it? What's her name? What is your name? PFFT. You've got a nice way with words, I'll give you that," she said, interrupting herself before she could finish. She really didn't want to frighten this lad Awa or give him any reason to be upset, and she certainly didn't want to enrage the blondie next to him. She had an instinct that warned her to exercise caution. "But I need to say, you could work on it a bit more. Don't worry, with enough practice with people, especially people you don't know or talk to often, you'll be able to introduce yourself to people without worry, like me. And, if you have enough yen on you, you could sign up for a class to help you with speaking to others." Ooh. I feel like I went too far in a tangent. Ahem. With her weight on her right foot and her left hip protruding, she bowed her torso. She winked, placed a palm on that hip, and gestured with a thumb to herself. "I'm Mei Hatsume, junior inventor professionaire and mother of many innovative babies. I'm at your service." She looked up. "Wait, didn't I say my name to you both already?" "Oh, right. I was rambling during my introduction. Man, I can be so scatterbrained sometimes. I didn't think about whether you two could understand me through all the chit-chat I was doing." "Huh?" Bakugo gave her a quick glance. Someone didn't come across a living stereotype, such as a dim-witted scientist, every day. It was encouraging to see that his old pal in the hazmat suit was trembling little less than before. He was becoming more relaxed. It allowed him to speak more fluently and without stuttering. This meant that instead of continuing with their intended discourse, the radioactive Komodo had to ask about King Caesar. That would satisfy their insatiable curiosity about the artificial mutt and also aid in Izuku's socialization. Asking someone about what they were doing usually results in a more in-depth conversation and improves one's social skills. That is, unless the other person was an ass. He gave Izuku a shove to get things started. What's with you and, what's with King Caesar?" Pointing to the dog, Izuku said, "King Caesar? Oh, you're talking about baby number 14. Wait, I already said, right? I made my baby for a science fair project at my middle school.
Baby? Katsuki asked in a dismissive tone. His childhood friend was merely thinking, like a mother gushing over a child, how adorable it was that she called her invention baby.
Of course. I made it. I'm its mommy and it's my baby. Anyway, shush, no interruptions. I made my baby to be able to analyze the particles in the sewage pipes. You know, how much of it is organic and inorganic, what are the main chemical compounds, level of microorganisms in relation to all the detritus and waste, that sort of thing. She stops to take a breath and slow a bit. Being a science lover, she had to continuously tell herself to calm down because there was no use in trying to teach non-scientists if she couldn't be understood. Although we already know that certain chemicals and compounds can remove all the impurities from water while maintaining its drinkability, my science fair partner is attempting to develop a more affordable solution. The more taxpayers benefit from the solution, the more efficient it is. Money is saved, she said after pausing briefly. Solution. Chemistry puns, hey. Wow, that's actually pretty cool of you and your partner, Izuku replied. Shy guy, I appreciate your compliment, but I have a question for you. Why have you been wandering throughout the sewer system in Musutafu? System? She approached Izuku and looked through the hazmat suit's visor. Then I began to hear voices, whispers, and murmurs in the wind that had to have originated from that shadow that had been shadowing my baby 14 for a while, but it always vanished before I could get more than a peek. Bakugo's cheeks were flushed with red. And now, I know it's you. And also your blonde friend there, who, by the way, also needs to introduce himself. His attention was so focused on Izuku that he neglected to give his name. TCH. It's Bakugo. It's Katsuki Bakugo. He gestured with a thumb towards the lizard. I've been Izuku's friend since before kindergarten. I've also been trying to help Izuku deal with his social issues, which you're doing great with, by the way. He told the radioactive kid. Now, were you going to say anything else to Izuku or do you want to hear why we're in this shithole? She buried her chin in her palm, seemingly lost in thought. Not really. Oh, and I want to ask why you decided to name my baby? Izuku gulped as he was placed on the spot. Oh, you know, I don't really like dealing with people or talking to them. But I still have to attend to school, so I need a means to travel, and the sewer system is ideal because no one would think to commute here. After years of doing this, I suddenly see this robotic dog. At first, I just ignored King Caesar here, but as the days passed, I felt the need to speak with it. I'm not sure why, but it might have to do with how lonely people tend to humanize objects. I tend to see Kachan on a daily basis, so I felt compelled to. I couldn't just not call your baby number 14 in my attempt to humanize it and make myself less lonely, you know. And that's it, that's all. Yeah, I wasn't entirely alone, but I only had Kachan, so I probably felt I needed another company. Said Hatsume. I'm not quite sure how I feel about the shifts from slow and awkward stuttering to fast-paced rambling, and back again. Izuku hung his head. Oh. Hatsume threw Bakugo aside, wrapped an arm around Izuku's shoulders, and forcibly raised Izuku's head back up. I'm sorry about that. Oh, don't be. It's not meant to insult you or put you down. I'm just saying that was a bit jarring. I guess this must be how you felt when I started to flap my gums at Mach speed. A little off-put, somewhat uncomfortable, but knowing it ain't entirely bad, right? With her hands out defensively, she backed away from him and said, You're awfully close. She approached King Caesar and started examining the dog, saying, Okay, I understand you want space. She saw that the area near the toes had a few scratches. She talked on as she carried out her examination. As the future support item designer that I am, you should know that I don't just give in to everyone's pleas to get off them. In fact, I think it's a good idea to go really near to people because it's easier to collect measurements that way. I understand, but you just seem so acclimatized to strangers that I thought getting to know you further might be detrimental rather than beneficial. She halted her scheme and turned to face Izuku. In addition to not being very sleek and stylish, I felt up the material and it didn't feel good. I can also tell from how it sags on you and your body that it's made of a heavy material because, aside from not being too form-fitting and looking like it could easily snag on a twig, that hazmat suit of yours was made by whom? You couldn't be very comfortable right now, can you? Besides, I could hear you breathing heavily from that contraption, if you know what I mean. It sounds more like raspy gasping or something. Izuku was constantly reminded of his predicament by her words and criticisms of the hazmat suit. With every utterance, he undermined the tentative camaraderie he was cultivating with Hatsume and gradually turned icy once more. Izuku's mask grew more and more indifferent, so that neither Hatsume nor Bakugo could see what was behind it. Even with multiple layers of clothing covering a person, their emotions still come through, and they sensed that something was wrong with the youngster. Hatsume began to get worried. "Hey, is there anything wrong?" she questioned, her expression contorted. Psst. Bakugo gave his old pal a little prod. "Do you feel alright telling her about why you wear that thing? Or are you going to try and make up some excuse?" Izuku was first concerned about what would happen if this potential friend found out about his quirk and, like everyone else, withdrew from him. Why make an excuse at all? If I was going to try and befriend her, I would have to tell her about my quirk anyway. Might as well get it over with. Who would want to be friends with such a carcinogen, after all? Bakugo provided him the titles of 2 different films and 1 anime series he could locate and watch online to help him get over it. In all of them, secretly befriending individuals and remaining friends until the very end when the secret was revealed. This, of course, was only possible since they were initially friends. Bringing this up to Hatsume now, when they were only acquaintances? This radioactive reptile, however, was accustomed to people avoiding him. His words were crisp and chilly as he addressed the pinky locks in front of him. "I wear this hazardous materials protective suit because that's what I am. He stretched out the drooping parts of his suit. "A mutation in my quirk factor caused me to be a walking radioactive factory. A living biohazard. Resident Evil. That's why I wear this." There was quiet for a while. Izuku was prepared for this to occur. Even with the outfit on, people shied away from him. It was just a question of, "Is that all?" Izuku was not prepared for that response. Both he and Bakugo were staring at her with open jaws and big eyes. He questioned her gently, "Could you run that back? I didn't quite catch what you said." She said, giving them a strange look, "I was just asking if that was all. I thought it was something a bit more complex than that, along the lines of toxic dump intern or something." Pinky Locks sighed. "Compared to something like that, I just don't find it too interesting if something cool is just a byproduct of someone else's quirk. I mean, one of my classmates has a quirk that causes her to spread mushroom spores wherever she walks. I was excited this one time in elementary where another classmate got mysteriously sick. I was trying to create a nurse robot, baby number 6 if I remember right, and thought that it would be cool to help and find out what was wrong. Turns out, it was just because some of her spores accidentally clogged up his windpipe. Excitement? Gone." Hatsume looked empty and dissatisfied. She directed her dissatisfaction at Izuku's outfit. "In any case, that raggedy hazmat suit you're wearing is an affront to my eyes. Why not appeal for something less, like that?" She grimaced. Well, these things aren't really, cheap. Must be one of those companies, greedy corporate heads, giving good support companies bad names." Her expression changed. Hatsume gestured dramatically at her newest model, saying, "Wait, I have an idea. I can design you a much better hazmat suit." "Come again. And since I'm doing this for 1, my own entertainment, and 2, my bleeding heart, it will be free of charge." "Come again," Hatsume exclaimed as she pulled out a pencil, paper, and measuring tape and started to measure Izuku's physique firmly. "Why wah? Huh? Yeah. This material is intended to reduce particle and electromagnetic radiation, but it's still overly dense and stiff. Flexibility is needed around the dorsal and tail plates. More testing is needed to better prepare the materials, and that's hot. The ventilation and thermoregulation systems also need to be upgraded. The helmet has to be replaced, and a mouthpiece with moving components and a zipper to allow for food intake should be added. But wait, a detachable air filter with a unique lock and seal technique would be more effective. The more reserved teenager said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa," as he wildly shook his hands, pushing Hatsume off of him. The boy needed room and air. Her close quarters and hyperactivity were just too much for him to take at the moment. He needed those, and time to take in all the female had just said and done in relation to his existing gear. After all, he was finding it hard to believe. He was becoming excited just thinking about it, and his breathing became too quick. "Hey." He received a casual headshake from his blonde friend. "Calm down. Shut in. Breathe, Izuku, breathe." "Sorry about that, Midoriya. I was too excited at the prospect of starting a new project. I mean, building stuff like this is why I live and breathe." His breathing became steady as he said, It's. Woo, okay. I'm okay. Bakugo. It's okay, Hatsume." Who? This allowed him to consider the current situation more clearly. After all, he was going to strive to live a better life because he had just met this individual. Yes, well, that doesn't even call for further investigation. He peered over his mask at the engineer. "Why?" Explodewinir firmly whispered in Izuku's ear. "Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, Izuku." The Komodo asked, Can you repeat the question, Midoriya?" with an embarrassed flick of his index fingers. "Well, it's just, I and Ka-chan and we just met you today. We're not friends, hardly DEKU acquaintances, and yet, you want to help me out. For nothing at all." Hatsume was perplexed at this point. They do, after all, reside in a world where superheroes are real. Their only sources of income were government grants, goods, and advertising. They performed their good works without charge. They did not demand anything of the folks they were assisting. Police officers and firefighters don't either. What makes a girl in middle school so unique? Izuku was strange. She remarked, "You're weird." She considered his previous remarks, how he seemed to be saying, "Can't a person help others for free just because?" Stated that they were merely friends. She actually only had her infants with her, aside from her parents and science fair partner. She opened her arms wide and said, "Well, if you want to pay me for my next project, give me a hug and say that we're friends." The males tensed up as they heard her declaration. Bakugo was experiencing several emotions. One of them, "Shut up. Shipping trash half of my personality," was that he felt like the third wheel on a date, although these two weren't in a romantic relationship. Secondly, it perplexed him. Yes, he was aware that good deeds could be done in vain. However, she just promised to produce a costly item for nothing. "I was merely pleading with a really unfriendly person for a small amount of friendship. A scientist who is eccentric, indeed." Izuku was shivering in the meantime. He almost burst into tears. Of all people, someone was requesting that he become friends with them. He, an animated, talking, walking little Fukushima. She was pleading for someone to be her friend. Someone who gave his own mother cancer. He was having a hard time comprehending what was going on. Furthermore, she was acting so nonchalantly when doing it, and it was their first meeting. This is hardly the kind of development that Ka-chan has been studying with his little Komodo ass for the last few days. He had anticipated a gradual friendship. "Okay. This is kind of a good deal. But where are you going to get the materials to make the hazmat suit?" Not only that, but Izuku uses 3 different suits, one for each day he decides to go to school. Ka-chan seems resentful at it. That's going to be a bit of cash needed. "Oh, don't worry about what it'll cost me, which is very little by the way. Just so you know, my family have connections to people. I'll be able to make the best suits for our friend here so he won't have to." Izuku gave Hatsume a hug and even threw his tail around her. All were taken aback. Hatsume was not used to such unexpected close contact, and Bakugo was taken aback that his friend, who was usually a recluse and shy around new people, was making such an approach with someone they had just met. "We recently met a friend, though." He sniffed under his hazmat mask. Thank you. Hatsume offered him an uneasy back pat, but she smiled condescendingly at the same time. Grunting, Bakugo turned to face King Caesar. You feel like a third wheel too, scrap metal? Caesar King did not reply. Rather, it merely observed fate as it unfolded. N. It just occurred to me that Isku's canon personality is more suited for a certain plasma-powered turtle rather than a certain irradiated lizard, dinosaur, titan, tree thing. Whatever the hell Shin is him. Oh well, not going to change it.